In 2017, you basically founded Mattereum, and then maybe I'm just going to say some words that basically or some phrases that kind of comes from it. So humanizing the singularity, organizing the world's property and making it universally acceptable and useful, and then this is from the white paper, turning code into law. So, and then it asks basically, or answers, what if code really did have the force of law behind it? And so I guess talk about how you first really just said, yep, this is what's happening from the Ethereum, but then as well, maybe you want to preface it from what is a smart contract, because maybe some people wouldn't be familiar with that.
That's a really great question. Let me do a little framing and then we'll get to the smart contract.
For sure.
So this idea of, let's email money around, right? If you think of this whole blockchain thing as the next media type that the internet eats, Netflix eats TV, Spotify eats radio, right? Bitcoin should have just eaten banking, right?
Yeah.
And it should just have been the Californian ideology rolls over another industry, no hiccup, right? But because of all this libertarian crap on the front end of it, it basically covered itself in antibodies and then injected itself into the bloodstream, and everybody said no. Whereas if it had just been like, hey, the internet does money, everybody would have said yes. Right? And it's a strategic blunder of the worst kind, right? It's already set the technology back half a generation, but the technology is so good that it's survived, and this is the underlying philosophical split between the people that say blockchain and the people that say Bitcoin. Right? But it hasn't been made fully explicit, right? And it's just, you get to a fork in the path and you have to pick a side.
Yep.
Right. So then we come along to this whole question of code is law, right? If we're going to have a system where we're emailing money to each other, okay, it'd be nice if we didn't wind up getting caught up in somebody else's legal system every time we did that.
Absolutely. Every sovereign state. Yeah.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
Because I don't know where you live because I'm just emailing you money.
Right.
And if it turns out that it breaks the law in the jurisdiction that I send it to, you're going to get into trouble because I emailed you money. This is not helping us, right? So it'd be nice if we had some sensible approach to jurisdiction.
Yes.
Something that would give us some ability to handle this as a set of contingencies. So think of something like consumer protection law in Germany. Germany has incredibly strong consumer protection law, just unbelievably strong consumer protection. So there are lots of things which if you did them in America wouldn't raise an eyebrow, but in Germany, the person that you've sold the goods to could just be like, I changed my mind, take this back, give me all my money, right? And so you need some way of knowing that you're doing business in Germany, even though you're just sending money to somebody over the internet.
Right.
That's a problem for a computer.
Right. It's not for you and I to keep up with and continue to think of. Yes.
Right. In an ideal world, a piece of software understands I'm in Belize, you're in Berlin, right? I send you the money in exchange for you sending me, your uncle's cufflinks or whatever it is, right? And a little message pops up on our computers, and this is, by the way, you realize this will be regulated by consumer protection laws, and the person on the other side of the deal has 30 days to change their minds.
Right.
End of discussion. You want to escrow the money in this instance rather than make the payment because a return may be demanded.
Yep.
Okay, fine, now we're compliant, right? It's a job for a machine, and it's a job for a machine in exactly the same way that route planning is a job for a machine, right? You get your phone out, it's got GPS, it tells you how to get where you're going when you get off a plane in some place you've never been before, right? You get on this bus, and you get a ticket here, and you go there, and you do this thing. Perfect, right? That's what you want. Not integrated enough that I can just make the payment for the tickets on my phone, but boy howdy, that's the next step, right?
It is.
Get off a place I've never been, buy me ticket, tell me where I go, get off of this bus, get on this train, get on that bus, now you're at your destination, right? Or if you prefer, get an Uber, because Uber, of course, does let you pay for the ticket, wherever you are in the world, on the same device, in the same interface, on the same infrastructure.
Yep, as we've been even using here in London.
See what I'm saying, right? So how much of that process is just that you're in this kind of mystical Uber jurisdiction where wherever you are in the world, Uber works the same way, but public transport works a different way.
Yep.
Right? You'll pay because it just is the same everywhere you go. Same thing with Airbnb, right? There's a pseudo jurisdiction in which it doesn't matter where you are, the user experience is the same, That's what we want from internet money.
Yep.
We just want money that works the same wherever you are. And some combination of software and bureaucracy takes out all the lumpy bits to leave you with a uniformly smooth experience, right? That's what we need to do next, right? Now, this gets us to this question of smart contract, right? If you're going to be producing systems of this level of complexity, you need to be able to automate not just the payment, but you need to be able to automate the contract around the payment.
Yes, the entire, from beginning to end.
So it's a single smooth system.
Yep.
Right? So, because I mean, this sounds completely naive, but all of the money in the world lives inside of contracts or similar legal containers, right? Other than spare change in your trouser pocket, everything else is wrapped up inside of legal agreements, right? Your income that comes inside of a set of employment agreements. When you make a payment to the power company, that's inside of a 60-page contract you signed when you signed up with PG&E. If you give money to a charity, as soon as you drop that coin into the jar, it's suddenly covered by a different regulatory structure than when it was spare change in your pocket. Right. As soon as it crosses the horizon, it's now, it's the Charities Commission, it's a 501c3, it has to demonstrate what it did with your money, there's an accountability chain. Like, money almost never exists in a free state. Right? It's always trapped inside of some kind of contractual container or legal container. Right? So if we just model money, but we don't build a software analogy of all those legal containers and all those contractual containers, all the legal and contractual containers exist exactly the same way they did before, and we get very little benefit from automating money. Right? If Bitcoin just allows me to make payments, but every single one of those payments is accompanied by a 60-page paper contract, how far forward are we?
And so something that Mattereum is developing right now is basically a proof of concept with some of these trust models, and it deals with our old friend from Star Trek, William Shatner and his Collectibles, and then also the Stradivarius violins, excuse me. So talk about how this proof of concept is moving forward.
Okay, so we have this kind of philosophical realization that the blockchain is the natural architecture for the Internet of Money, right? We basically sever the libertarian story from the head end of that. They've had a shot, it hasn't worked. Maybe if the dollar collapses, Bitcoin does go to $5 million, but I don't think that's how this goes, right? Let's just see what happens with that though. But assuming that we don't see a complete crash of the global financial system or rebasing onto Bitcoin, that doesn't mean it's the end of the blockchain story. Because you still need a global computer system which enables point-to-point trade without going through massively expensive international third parties. Right? 50% of the world's commodity trading is done in high-frequency trading systems, and those high-frequency trading systems are mostly in America. There's no way that that's going to be true in 20 years.
Yes.
Right?
We are almost looking through the looking glass of what's coming.
It's just inevitable. Why would the Chinese and the Europeans trade all of their commodities in America, put all of their money and all of their assets under American law, leave a chunk of it on the table in the States? There's no way that continues. Right? Eventually, you're going to wind up with a globalization of trade. And the globalization of trade requires a system where everybody is participating on the same basis. And that transformation takes you into architectures that look like blockchain. Right? I can't stress enough how inevitable it is, because if you politically decentralize, you can't then technically decentralize without dealing with the speed of light problem.
We're still in that physics problem.
You see what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
So, the shift of geographic power, where everybody has control in their own country and then we network, immediately exposes you to this problem that you can't synchronize the computers.
Right.
So whereas if it's all happening inside of a single trading location, like, okay, this building in Connecticut, that's the commodities exchange, that's where all the deals happen, which is basically the current architecture. Those kind of models are cut and dried. You move the money, you move the authority into one building, all the computers are on cables which are measured to the millimeter, job is done, right? If you're going to have all that decision making and all those trade happening in the countries where the assets live, those countries are far apart, you have a light speed delay, you can't use that kind of architecture, you need a different architecture. The only computer systems that we have that are really compensated for this light speed delay problem are blockchain systems.
Yep.
Or Google Spanner, but you can't use that for trade.
Okay.
Right? So this is the inevitability of something that looks like this, right? It's just inevitable. So the libertarian transformation of society was a hypothesis being tried. Turns out that we're not rolling in that direction right now. On the other hand, the globalization of trade has been a fact for centuries. Mm-hmm. We've gone through 4 accelerations of that in recent history with containerization and finance and the internet and all the rest of this. There's no doubt about the direction of travel. So having seen all of that, the question then was, how do we get skin in the game? How do we get involved in that process? And we started out with a very ambitious, quite libertarian flavored approach. This is kind of how we're going to do things. As the libertarian vision flagged last year, we began to realize that, okay, there's very little chance that we're going to see this kind of global blockchain republic type thing come into existence. Yes. Yeah. The question was, okay, how do we maintain our grip on the global trade transformation, given that we're not going to be in the process of creating this kind of para-sovereign court structure? How do we do that? So what we decided was we were going to go right to the other end of the scale, still keep all of the original Mattereum concepts about rule of law, regulation, and smart contract, but apply them to things which are granular and atomic.
Yes.
Right? So what's the smallest unit of law that you want to travel with an object as the object is shipped around the world? And that's the definition of the object.
Right, or authenticity of it. Or
authenticity. So if the object is a collectible, it's authenticity. If the object is an engineering thing, then it's specification. If the object is a commodity, then it's sourcing.
Sure.
Right? There are whatever it is that you're buying and selling, you've got different questions that you want to answer about that thing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
But the reality and the integrity of the description of the goods is at the bottom of all trade.
Right. Integrity, that's a great word for it. Right. Yes.
The money goes in one direction. We've got the payment rails. That's all fine. That's happening. Yeah. The information about the goods has to be accurate, or you're sending the money into space.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So what we tried to do was build the anchor, which was on the other part of the deal. If we're going to send you Bitcoin or Ether or a stable coin like the DAI or any one of these things, right? If you've got hard money going in this direction and it's landing on a target where the description of the goods is only 70% accurate, huge opportunity for fraud.
Yeah,
right?
Huge.
If I'm sending squishy dollars, which are attached to the Visa chargeback system, if the description of goods is 70% accurate, I don't like it, I make a chargeback. If we're operating in a blockchain system internationally, there is no chargeback. So the description of the goods has to be ironclad.
Yes.
And the trick here is that we move the insurance function from being associated with the payment rail, which is the Visa model, to being associated with the description of goods. So we wrap the insurance, in case something goes wrong, around the goods rather than attaching the insurance to the payment rail. Right? And this gets into a kind of philosophical concept about repudiatability, right? So if I send you money, but I have the ability to pull my money back, that's called a repudiatable payment.
Sure.
In that situation, you're taking the risk because I send you the money, you send me the goods, I claw back the money, now I've got the money and the stuff.
Yeah.
The Visa model. Non-repudiatable payments, I send you the money, I can't claw the money back, so now I send you the money, you don't send me the stuff, now you're left with the money and the stuff.
Right.
And that problem, right, the entire global economy right now runs on repudiatable payments.
Right.
Which always leaves the power in the hands of the buyer. Right. Now, remember what I said about the colonial system, where it's all trade at gunpoint. In a trade at gunpoint system, where do you want the power to be? In the hands of the buyers, because the sellers are the people that we just invaded.
Oh yes, of course, because they have the different silk or whatever it is. Yes.
See what I'm saying,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So the very fact that the world runs on repudiatable payments is part of the architecture of trade and colonialism.
Yes.
Right? In societies before colonialism was a big thing, payments tended to be made in gold, and we're non-repudiatable. So if I walk into the shop and I hand you the gold and you hand me the goods and I walk out again, you've got the gold, end of story. And I can't come and ask you for the gold back unless I've got strong proof.
Right.
So the very fact that we've got this repudiatable payments architecture was about concentrating power in the hands of the colonial authority. Right? The wire transfer system, I've sent the money to Taiwan, but they didn't send me the goods. I'm taking my money back. Screw those guys. Yes, sir. That's of course the way we will do it. Right? You know, this is how deeply baked in these assumptions are.
Totally.
Right? So when we start tearing that stuff up because the political power situation no longer supports that kind of architecture, right? You know, I'm not going to send you my very nice handmade Japanese whatever it is because you're making a credit card payment because you can do a chargeback.
Oh, of course.
We won't trade under those circumstances. Well, we will, but we'll jack our prices up to compensate.
Yeah, and then we'll make sure that we're good in this situation.
And it's all inefficiency.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So if we start into that kind of system, right, if we're going to move the insurance, right, if we go from repudiatable to non-repudiatable payments, right, you get paid, you stay paid, we have to move the insurance function from being attached to the payment rail like it is in Visa to being attached to the definition of goods.
Right.
So you make me a promise that you're going to sell me this thing and it's authentic. I send you the money, but once you've got the money, I can't get my money back. If the goods aren't authentic, I have to be able to make a claim somewhere.
Yeah.
And I claim on your insurance. Right? And that is the architecture for creating a structure in which you could do trade globally, but the books will balance for people.
Right.
Now, all very highfalutin. What does this have to do with William Shatner?
Yeah.
Right? And the answer is, the collectibles market is huge.
Yep.
It's entirely driven by questions of authenticity. People will pay less for things that they want than they would otherwise because they're afraid that the thing that they're buying is not authentic, so the prices are artificially depressed for people that are selling real stuff and for people that are selling fakes. So the good vendors are being dragged down by the fake vendors.
Right, and then that's good, not good for anyone.
And if you can drive the fake vendors out of these markets, the prices for the goods rise.
And will be consistent to what the value is.
Bingo, right? Because we're no longer trading at a discount because we don't trust the goods we're buying. So it's an excellent market for really strong product information, right? And okay, we don't expect people to be buying and selling goods using non-repudiatable payments on blockchains as the mainstream approach to the collectibles market anytime soon. But those same concepts about truth and trust and authenticity apply, even in a situation where somebody's making a payment on something like Visa. Right? Because in that market, there is so much sketchy stuff going on that you can still burn a clean spot to great financial benefit. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is we just weren't going to say no to William Shatner. Right? I mean,
good point.
You know, when we were approached by Shatner and his team, you know, there were a couple of different things that we could have done first. But after we had been approached by, you know, the Shatner operation, and, you know, it started with a direct message from William Shatner, I'm like, whoa, he is talking to me? It was quite a shock. But after that, you know, it was slightly like direction set. Because we weren't going to say no. And with that as our first project, it was obvious the second project was also going to be somewhere in that space. So that is one of these path dependency moments where, you know, if the first thing that had happened had been the violin guys had said, okay, we're doing the violin, then we would have been talking about fine art and all the rest of this stuff. As it is, the first thing that happens is, you know, the Shatner collectibles, and so we're doing that, that's what we're going to do. Right? And that's fine because, you know, if you've got a fundamentally flexible underlying world model, it doesn't really matter what you do first because they're all examples of a fundamental principle. Right. So we've got this fundamental principle which is about, you know, decolonized trade and fair exchange of goods and not routing things through third parties, developed countries, and an internet of money and all the rest of these concepts. But at the end of the day, it boils down to, I send you money, you send me stuff, and the stuff is what I paid for.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. We'll do collectibles. Now, the other part about the collectibles market is collectibles generally have lots of different owners over their lifespan. Right? I mean, a Stradivarius violin, it's not a collectible, it's an antiquity, but it's, you know, 325, 350 years old. Many people have owned it in that time period. A lot of them have dotted around the world where they've been owned by people in different countries. They haven't stayed inside of a single family or a single region. A lot of the time they're worth more because of how amazing their previous owners were.
Right, because they kept it up, they kept the value going, etc.
It's not just that, because if somebody incredibly famous owned the violin and played it for 25 years,
Oh, I see. Yes, yes, yes.
you're getting their history and their patina with the object.
Absolutely.
Right? This is not just an object which was made by Stradivarius. Stradivari? Anyway, this is also an object which was played by Yehudi Menuhin.
Right.
Right?
Yes, 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 yes.
Multiple layers, so the thing acquires value with each layer that's added to it over time. Right? You know, if I have a Star Trek collectible, okay, that's fine. I bought it directly from Mr. Shatner, right? Very good. Then, if I happen to be, let's say, Keanu Reeves, and I bought this thing for one of my friend's kids, 2 layers.
Yes,
right?
2 layers.
So that's the Shatner thing that was bought by Keanu Reeves. Yes,
Ah.
and then he gave it to his friend's kid as a birthday present. Yes.
Yeah.
And now the friend's kid, is going to top up their college fund off this thing.
Right.
And so you wind up with these stories which weave themselves around the objects over time.
Oh, it's so interesting. Yes.
And that's a great case for blockchain, because this gradual accumulation of knowledge and surface and patina,
Totally.
it's the authenticity, but it's also the narrative that gets woven around the thing over time, makes the thing worth more than it was when we bought it.
Wow.
And this is decommodification.
Right.
I very strongly believe that the internet, or digital technology in general, pushes things to extremes, right? But it always pushes things to both extremes. Total transparency and total anonymity, rather than this kind of hazy grey area that you would get with cash transactions, right? Total privacy and total exposure. So the commodities are super commodity, right? You go to Amazon, you type, I want to buy printer paper, it will show you 38 brands, they will all be identical, you click one, you're done.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, it's also hyper-specific, because if you're buying something from a dealer, they'll have a web page where they detail every single little thing about that object.
Of course. Yes.
In a way that they wouldn't have done before. Right? So both hyper-generic and hyper-specific. So we've seen the hyper-generic is everywhere. Now we have to build the hyper-specific as the counterbalance to the tendency of things to become generic.
Yes. Damn.
That's really the crux of it, right? We've built out all of the way in one direction in this kind of completely generic economy. The unique economy is very, very, very lagging.
Yeah.
Right? Because
That's fertile for opportunity, though.
Oh, it's gigantic.
Yeah.
I mean, and by gigantic, I mean like 5 or 10% of global GDP.
Oof.
Gigantic, right? Because if you think about this, right, everybody owns a mix of things which are generic and unique, right?
Okay.
The richer you are, the more unique you tend to own, but also the poorer you are, right? Handmade by my grandma who knitted it herself.
Or secondhand
Right.
clothes. Yes.
It's unique at one end of the spectrum, right? And this is a Picasso sketch is unique at the other end of the spectrum, right? It's not rich and poor, generic and unique. It's actually that unique occurs both at the rich end and at the poor end, right? So the entire world of unique goods at the poor end, all of that stuff is impossible to trade because nobody can identify what it is.
Yep.
Right? If you want to buy, a pair of woolen mittens and somebody wants to sell you a pair from Peru, they're not well enough specified for you to be comfortable buying them. Because you feel like you're kind of taking your chances, right? If they were well enough specified that you would know that they would fit your hands exactly and they're really made of the wool that they're said to be made of, and here's a picture of the granny knitting them and all the rest of it, you're probably willing to pay more for a pair of Peruvian mittens knitted by somebody's granny than you are for a pair of plastic mittens that came in a box from China.
Yeah, and then was just mass produced in
And
a
then was just
box of
mass-produced.
10,000.
Because it's kind of cool and the mittens are actually better because wool is better than plastic, and you know that somebody made them with craft and you can see the little stitches and you're like, oh, this is nice.